Hello, everyone. I'm Rebecca Weber. This is your AMAC podcast, Better for America. And as I always remind you, if you're not getting your political news from AMAC, then you won't be informed about American politics. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. And to all of our AMACers out there tuning in, thank you so much. Now, today we have a great show. We have with us Mike Gallagher. And as many of you know, Mike is a radio host, a conservative political commentator. He's the host of a national radio show called The Mike Gallagher Show, and that airs throughout the country on Salem Radio Network. We encourage you to check him out. He is also a Fox News contributor, guest host, a best-selling author, and a friend of AMAC's. It's an honor to have you with us here today, Mike. Thank you so much for joining us.
Rebecca, the honor is all mine. You know, every single day on the radio show, I get to tell millions of people about AMAC and our show's partnership with AMAC. The spirit of Dan Weber is alive and in my heart every single day. His vision for America and his vision for protecting and fighting for seniors every day lives on. And it's just an honor to visit with you and the great AMAC team, because AMAC means an awful lot to all of us here at Team Gallagher.
You know, thank you for those kind words about Dan Weber. I mean, he was just a real hero. He's an example of how one man can make a great difference. And I know he's so proud of you and what you do each and every day, really defending the values that make this country so great. And I want to talk a little bit about what we're seeing happening in the media, this huge distraction. I'm calling it the Trump distraction. It's a really very interesting topic, because when people are aware of the messaging that we're seeing coming from the left, and we're aware that they're doing it with intent to distract us from the real issues, then we can be better informed. And you recently mentioned on your podcast, Mike, that the left is intentionally trying to eat up everyone's time with propaganda, really distracting us from the real issues. So instead of hearing media talk about the things like soaring crime, indoctrination of our children in schools, a wide open border, I mean, the list goes on and on, threats from China, etc. The left really wants us focused on other things like the January 6th insurrection, as they call it. And you know more than anyone else really how valuable airtime is. How do you think media can combat these constant threats and distractions from the real issues? How do we fight back against their dangerous messaging? I know it's a broad question, but you're the right man to answer that question.
Well, thank you. You know, Rebecca, gaslighting is a term that's used a lot on social media. It's become very popular in 2022 lexicon. We talk a lot about the act of gaslighting. Gaslighting is the term comes from a play, an old play that was about a man who tried to convince someone that they were the ones who were crazy, even though they were the normal ones, that they were the ones wildly out of touch. Gaslighting is the act of making you feel that everything that you believe in is upside down, when the person trying to convince you that you're crazy, they're really the ones who are out to lunch. The Democrats are in an epic battle for the soul and the heart of America, and they can only use the gaslighting process to win votes. You're right. They can't focus on the shattered economy. They can't talk about businesses that were destroyed during the 2.5 years of the pandemic, which, you know, President Biden has now decreed is over magically. Suddenly on 60 Minutes, he's decided the pandemic has ended. And isn't that convenient, 50 days before the midterm election? They've got to gaslight us. They've got to distract, and they've got to make us feel like all of our beliefs about America's sovereignty, law and order, the right to live and work in this country without fear of persecution or prosecution. They've got the whole world turned inside out. There's a great inversion that has taken place. And I'm confident that on November the 8th, enough Democrats are going to join with Republicans and say, enough is enough is enough. Americans are fed up. We're frustrated with the way the country has gone. Biden can pretend that the economy is okay. We know it's not. Biden can pretend that the border is secure. We know it's not. Biden can pretend that liberal and progressive district attorneys no cash bail policies haven't led to an explosion in crime. We know they're wrong. So they're lying and they're distracting, and it's the only chance they have to win. Rebecca, they're desperate, they're frightened, and they can't believe that Nancy Pelosi is about to get fired as the Speaker of the House and is going to have to hand that gavel over to a Republican leader. It's going to be a good day, November the 8th. When we wake up November 9th, we're going to have a glorious victory that Americans desperately need.
Yeah, we are predicting a red wave, that's for sure, but we've got so much to work yet to do. We're nearing, I guess we've got 50 days or less now before that day comes upon us, and we can't forget what we've seen. Since 2020, Americans have experienced extreme censorship. And I want to talk a little bit about the FBI's influence on Mark Zuckerberg, because for many of us, we felt that censorship quite personally. We saw that the information that we were trying to post, sharing with friends and family, whether it be Twitter, Facebook, etc., that our voices were quieted. Now, a recently leaked email, and many have heard about this, that the CDC shows that Facebook was in fact assisting with debunking misinformation. But they had no merit to their claim. For example, Mark Zuckerberg said that the FBI had asked him to suppress or to be vigilant about any information coming out on the Hunter Biden laptop, that this was more Russian disinformation. People are seeing this today, and I just really want to encourage people to remember what is happening. This is against real people. You and I, the public square, invaded by enemies right here in the United States of America. My question is, do you think that this confession of the government essentially forcing their hand in our media, in our public square, this is really forcing their hand against our protected rights as Americans? Do you think that this will impact how people vote this November?
It depends on how many people become aware of the overt censorship that took place. You know, there's been polling that suggests that the amount of people who would have not voted for Joe Biden, who would have pulled the lever for Donald Trump, had they known about the Hunter Biden laptop story, was profound, and quite likely was enough to have provided the margin of victory for Donald Trump. Now, that's infuriating. It's maddening to know that, as you pointed out, Facebook was revealed to have been involved in the censoring of the Hunter Biden laptop story. Great journalists like Miranda Devine at one of America's oldest newspapers, the New York Post, they were doing amazing work exposing Hunter Biden for the corrupt, shady business dealings that he's had going with China, with Ukraine, the references to the big guy, and all the sordid stuff on the laptop. Forget the personal life, the catastrophe that apparently has been Hunter Biden's personal life. You know, people fight through demons. I'm sensitive to addiction. I know a lot of good people in recovery. Addiction is horrific to power through, and I think anyone can have some empathy for anyone's son or daughter who has had a lifetime of struggles with addiction. But there is a serious, nefarious chapter of Joe Biden's life, and that involves the relationship with his son that he has described as a very close one, and the pretense that he had no idea what Hunter Biden's real questionable business dealings were all about. Nobody believes that. Democrats don't believe it. Certainly Republicans don't believe it. And yet, as you pointed out, the big tech giants censored that story. They called it election misinformation. And as a result, perhaps we had an outcome in 2020 that we shouldn't have had. It depends, as I said, on how many people are aware of the censorship, are aware of the veracity of the Hunter Biden story and his business dealings accompanying his father, the vice president, to China aboard Air Force Two. The things that were said and done, if enough people are aware of it, sure, it's going to have an impact. But I think, Rebecca, more dramatically impacted will be Americans feeling what it costs to go to the grocery store, what it costs to fill up your gas tank, whether you have to have your head on a swivel and worry about being assaulted by a criminal who has been sprung loose because of Democrats' no cash bail policies, realizing the impact of illegal immigration on America. Certainly the residents of Martha's Vineyard saw it. They only put
sure
up with
did.
illegals for 44 hours before they shipped those illegals out of Tony Martha's Vineyard. Their hypocrisy on display for all the world to see. So I'm just hopeful that with organizations like AMAC, who are sounding the warning cry for radio shows and podcasts like the Mike Gallagher Show, reaching millions of people all over the country, I'm hopeful and I'm cautiously optimistic that enough people are going to get the message, and we're going to get it right on November the 8th. We've got to get it right on November the 8th, or I'm not sure we're going to have a country left.
Yeah, this is our time. This is our one shot. We've got to get it right. And I just want to stay here on the Hunter Biden story. Just like you, it breaks my heart to hear of anybody who's suffering from addiction, and we don't wish that on anyone. So I was very reluctant to learn more about really what was behind the Hunter Biden story, because I don't like to get caught up in things that are really very sad stories. I did, in fact, watch Who is Hunter Biden? And this is no plug for Fox Nation, but I encourage people to check it out because I was stunned. He says things in his own words. He's got pictures. There is a confirmation that, in fact, that there was so much going on that if the American people recognized it and knew it, if these stories hadn't been suppressed, that they would have likely voted a different way. We should be concerned as a nation. It is a national security threat. And when you get to Part 2, boy, so many things unfold. So I encourage people to know who you're voting for, understand what the Bidens are up against, and what may wind up happening is the whole thing's going to flip. And you said it, desperate people do desperate things, and I think that's what we're seeing here as they recognize that this information is now coming to light and will likely be further investigated. It's so important. Mike, thank you for that. I do want to pivot just a moment. Oh, go ahead. Please comment.
Let me add about the media's role in the Hunter Biden scandal, because the media's role in all of this has been shameful. It has been positively disgusting. Nobody doubts that if Donald Trump Jr. or Eric Trump had been involved in the foreign transactions and the business dealings that Hunter Biden was involved in, that the media would be all over it. It would be front page in the Washington Post, the Times, everybody, CNN. They would be screaming to the mountaintops about the impossibility that Donald Trump, the president, didn't know about his son's business dealings with China or Ukraine or Russia, all the crap that we saw in the Biden family, and yet the media has looked the other way. There's nothing to see here as far as the mainstream media is concerned about Joe Biden's relationship with Hunter. It's despicable, it's corrupt, and it's unforgivable. And that's why, of course, the mainstream media has approval ratings that are even lower than members of Congress. They should be ashamed of themselves. Journalism died a while ago, and it's too bad, but thankfully there are plenty of alternatives to the mainstream media, and I'm proud to be a part of that.
Yes, thank you so much. I do want to pivot here and ask you about something very interesting that we've recently learned, in part thanks to you. We learned that banks are tracking firearm purchases, and our Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren started reaching out to major credit card companies like American Express and Visa to push for new merchant category codes which would track all firearm and ammunition purchases. Now, this would ultimately allow the government to further violate our already threatened privacy by keeping an even closer eye on all gun owners. And keep in mind, I mean, if you're an evil, bad person who's purchasing a gun for the wrong reasons, we're not going to find you on that credit card statement, right? But how do you see these companies responding? That is, these companies such as American Express, and if they comply, how do you predict that people might react? What impact might this have?
This goes back to people becoming aware of something like this, and you're right, we were all over this on the Mike Gallagher Show. Tracking gun store sales are clearly going to target legal and lawful gun purchases. But to the left, there's no such thing as a legal or lawful gun purchase. They don't believe in the Second Amendment. They pretend on the one hand that they don't want to take away Americans' right to keep and bear arms, and yet, of course, by their actions, we know that they do. To have a firearm-specific code by Visa and by these big companies is just caving to the anti-gun, lobby, the anti-gun politicians. This is incidentally why I'm so grateful for AMAC, because AMAC is raising awareness over issues like this to its millions of members. You don't see other 50-plus groups doing this. You don't have that level of awareness from the AARP, dare I say, but AMAC is making sure that people are informed, that we are enlightened, and it's the only way we can push back. If they can do this under the cover of darkness, they will get away with it. It's the old adage about the camel poking his nose under the tent. And it's frightening, but thankfully there's been a gigantic pushback. Again, it's all about getting the message out. It's all about making Americans aware of what's really at stake. And that's going to be the difference come November the 8th, Rebecca.
It sure will. And, speaking of getting the message out, the left has a way of labeling their bills. They just are very false. Like this Reducing Inflation Act, we know is nothing but reducing inflation. It's creating more inflation. And Nancy Pelosi, I thought this was kind of funny because they just don't seem to have any steam behind their messaging, even their own audience. Right. She had to ask for an applause recently. Biden held a press briefing to celebrate the passing of the Inflation Reduction Act, right? As we saw what happened to the stock market. But while there's a lot that we can say here, I just think that this was such an awkward moment where Nancy Pelosi actually took the mic and practically scolded the audience for not applauding at the appropriate time. Take a listen to this.
Your extraordinary leadership has made this glorious day possible. That's an applause line. Jill was applauding.
Moments like this makes me, first of all, question the legitimacy of the applause to begin with, right? I mean, when you have to force somebody to applause for you, how strange. But do you think that there's a growing group of American people who are really staying quiet on the issues, meaning that we've got like a lot of shy voters who won't outwardly state that they're against the Inflation Reduction Act? Because clearly this audience isn't even applauding. What are your thoughts? I mean, this is another lie to the American people.
Well, first of all, you got to pull yourself, you have to pick yourself up off the floor when you consider Pelosi thanking Joe Biden for making us safer. That's going to be a real newsflash to the millions and millions of Americans who have to have their head on a swivel waiting for somebody to assault them from behind or shoot them or stab them or kidnap or carjack or smash their property. But second of all, and I admit this, Nancy Pelosi, for me, I have a personal over-the-top reaction to her, and it stems from ripping up the State of the Union speech right in front of President Trump. If you'll remember, President Trump gave a State of the Union speech, and she was so classless and so disgusting and so trashy that she took the copy of the president's speech that was ceremonially handed to the speaker, and she ripped it up with a smirk on her face. I think of that moment when I consider that she's going to get fired on November the 8th, as I said, and she's going to have to hand that big gavel that she wields like a cudgel. She's going to have to hand that gavel over to a Republican, and that's going to be a majestic day in America. She is one of the most bitter, vicious, political animals we've ever seen in Washington. She has done great damage to the America that I know and love and that millions of us do. When you have to stand there and tell people to please applaud, it's pathetic and it's shameful. But may Americans remember, if you just think of one image when you go to the polling place and you cast your vote and you put it into the ballot box, may you remember the Democrat Speaker of the House tearing the President of the United States speech into shreds in front of him, in front of the whole world. That just shows you how vile the Democrats are capable of being, and may there be some accountability for her actions come election day. I hope and pray there will be.
Yeah, you said it very well. We do the same here. We certainly hope, and we continue to pray as we get closer and closer to the midterm elections. I do believe in hope for America's future, and I believe that, Mike, because of our over 2 million AMAC members who give us so much hope. They encourage us. They remind us that there are good people in America, and people like you, Mike. Tell our listeners, how can we get to your podcast?
Well, I want to reiterate the need for an organization like AMAC in times like these, and emphasize, as you did, Rebecca, the power of prayer. Longtime listeners to my show know that I lost my wife Denise to endometrial cancer about 9 or 10 years ago. The year and a half that she was sick, we had in many ways the best year and a half of our lives. We loved, we lived, we traveled, we laughed. We knew how precious life was, and she was astoundingly strong. She never cried. She was never afraid. And I attribute that to the power of prayer, because when she was first diagnosed, I told her, look, I don't have to talk about this on the radio, honey. It's going to be a very personal thing. And she said, no, share with your listeners who love you and listen to the show what we're going through. And so I did. And as a result, I know that people north, south, east, and west were praying for her. We're praying for our sons. We're praying for me. And she was strong. We were lifted up by prayer. Prayer is profound, prayer is impactful, and prayer works. So I hope that anybody watching us today, Rebecca, will remember to lean into your faith, pray for our country, pray for our leaders, pray for one another, and pray that we get it right on November the 8th. I am eternally, prayerfully grateful for the Mike Gallagher Show partnership with AMAC. And I love telling everybody about this great organization every single day on my radio show, which is heard by about 7.5 million weekly listeners on terrestrial radio stations all around the country, and our podcast where we do highlights and we do the show and we stream the show on video. All things Team Gallagher can be found at mikeonline.com. So if you want to check out the Mike Gallagher podcast or find out how you can listen and watch the Mike Gallagher Show, feel free to go to our website, mikeonline.com, and I look forward to welcoming a bunch of great folks who watch the AMAC podcast to the Mike Gallagher Show at mikeonline.com.
That was beautiful. Thank you. I agree with you on the power of prayer and the peace that it can bring to your life. It can bring tremendous
Amen.
Peace. Just knowing that we have a creator, someone who's got can make good from bad. And so that's what we're praying here, that his timing is always perfect, that he hears us. He especially hears those who are brokenhearted. And we will continue to pray and be vigilant and continue to educate the American people. Mike, it was such an honor and a pleasure to have you with me today. Your media presence and your dedication to making sure that people of this great country hear the truth is so appreciated. So thank you.
God bless. Keep fighting the good fight, Rebecca. I enjoyed visiting with you, and to all the AMAC members, keep fighting the good fight.
Amen. And I want to thank each and every one of you out there listening. Thank you so much for tuning in. Watch, listen, track breaking news, and more. Make sure to tell your friends all about AMAC and the AMAC podcast, Better for America. You can go ahead and download that right from the AMAC News app. You can watch this show and track all kinds of breaking news on the AMAC News app. Don't forget to hit that like button, that subscribe button. Follow, like, and share wherever you are on social media. Until next time, I'm Rebecca Weber. This is your podcast, Better for America. Thank you for being here. God bless you, and we'll see you next time.